Hi everyone, welcome to USCS School. This is Grandmaster Magesh Panchanathan. So, I have some interesting games today that I wanted to go over. So, I guess we can jump right into it. So, I'm not going to talk about themes or anything like that. Let's just jump into the position first, and then after that, we can talk about what exactly is the topic or what I would like to discuss today. So, let's, for example, just look at this position. It's the first position or game that we're going to be looking at today. And as always, what I like to do is I like to talk about the position first, like basic observation, basic understanding of the position before we make any moves or before we think about plans or anything, calculate variations, whatever that is. So why don't we start our discussion by some of you telling me what you see in this position. Again, put it in chat. If you want to say, or if you want to say anything, of course, you can always raise your hand. All right, Aradhya says there's a backward pawn on e6. Agreed. Even though it's not in an open file, usually a semi-open file and a backward pawn could be a lot of trouble. But this is a backward pawn which is not in an open file, so it might not be that bad. Uncastled black king, okay. True. Bishop and rook on a1 not developed, okay, hasn't completed. Evan says open c file, only file, that's right. Weird stonewall structure where black's light squared bishop is out, okay. White has potential threats e4, king not castle, possibility of opening file, attacking, okay. All right, so not bad. I'm going to give it some more, so I see more coming in. White's pawn structure is better. Black is not castled. White's knight on d2 is bad. Awkward knight on bishop on h6 and h5. Okay, there are two of you who said the same thing. All right, very good. Let's quickly summarize the things that we talked about. Again, I always like to do this, and I really encourage all of you to do this because you, in fact, make a lot of decisions simply by doing this. Okay, so some of you, the pawn structure in general has been mentioned is better for white. I think we have to agree because there is a small hole, yeah? In white's position, there are no holes. c4 and e4 can be guarded by b3 and f3 in the future. So there are no pawn structure holes for white, whereas black does have this, yeah? So that's definitely a potential problem, right? With the e5 and f5, e5 and c5 squares, that's always, so c5 is okay, at least I can defend with b6, but e5 definitely is a strong place for me to play on. And okay, slightly awkward. We have to agree with that because this knight probably can go to f7, but then the bishop doesn't seem to be in the best situation, yeah? What else? We can talk about the king being in the center and possibly trying to attack along the e5. We also talked about white still not completing development. Okay, fair enough. I think we have discussed most of the important things. Now let's talk about what is it that you would try to plan and play, because there are two directions here for white, and that's why I think this is a very interesting position. What would you try to do as white here? Because of all the things we saw, remember these factors are usually the ones that help you come up with ideas and plans. Alexander has given me some idea. Alexander, this is an interesting idea, but you have to definitely be clear about calculation and see what is going on with that. And yeah, all right, let's see. Now, I'm going to start with the positional aspect of the game first, right? What is the only positional advantage that we talked about so far? The positional advantage, not dynamic, not initiative, just the positional advantage. What did we discuss? Of all the factors that we discussed. Let's see if anyone can tell me. Weak e5 square. The backward pawn, yes, Aradhya, but I think the e5 square potentially is the difference, right? The pawn cannot be attacked easily. It is a backward pawn, but it's just not an easy pawn to attack. But this, on the other hand, is a square that you can access. So I would say the e5 square is the only weak thing. So from a positional perspective, who can tell me what is it that you would really like to achieve? These factors is what always help you come up with plans and make good decisions in a game. You're always looking at these positions saying, this is what I want to achieve. Roger, that's a good place to start. I'm really looking for one very, very specific answer. Once we talk about the e5 square, I'm looking for one very specific answer. So Eric, your point is very generic. I need to develop my pieces, get everything into the game. That is true. And so Wagner, whatever you're talking about, and Roger also is very, very like generic. Of course, e5 is an outpost. Get your piece there is normal. Yeah. There is something even a little bit more specific that you have to do when you see a weak square. I'm actually glad we are talking about it because I'm not getting the direct answer. Remember this, you have a weakness to play at. That doesn't mean every single weakness becomes something that you can exploit, right? Aradhya, in some sense, what you're saying is important, yeah? Black should not be able to play e5. But in this case, I'm not too worried because if black plays e5, even if I don't win this pawn right away, that pawn will become a weakness. The d5 pawn will end up becoming a weakness. And that will also be in a semi-open file. So e5 is not something that I'm too worried about. Knight h2, f4, knight f3, knight e5. The problem with knight f4, if you come at f4, is that you have strengthened your square, but you've weakened your own square. So just like you have an outpost, now black will also have an outpost on e4. So I'm not a big fan of that. Okay, so it looks like Roger finally has given me the answer. Trade the bishop. This is the simplest thing you can do. And I want all of you to come to this conclusion very quickly. This should not be a difficult or roundabout thing to think about. You want e5 square. Every single minor piece that defends the e5 square should be gone. That's usually a dream position. And the biggest target is always the bishop first. Remember this, you can get the knights. It's much easier to get the knight, but it's always very difficult to get the bishop. So in this position, if I want to positionally dominate black, I'm simply looking for a trade. I just want this bishop on c1 to get traded with the bishop on d6. Now I have a little bit more access to e5 square. Now I want to get my knights in, and eventually whatever piece gets traded off, that's okay. But which one black piece would I always want to keep on the board? Which one? Minor piece. Correct, yeah? I definitely want this bishop to stay. The light squared bishop should stay. That's the classic good bishop versus bad bishop or good knight versus bad bishop position that I'm going to achieve. So I would definitely want the h5 bishop to stay and kind of continue to be bad. In middle game, always, it's very different. In middle game, the bishops can look bad, but I mean, might do a lot of things, but in end game, that bishop will definitely become very bad, yeah? Okay, so this is the positional aspect. Are there other aspects? I think some of you already mentioned this in the other aspects. So how else could you like to continue here? So there is one clear path we have discussed. Positional path. We'll probably move the knight out of the way. At some point, we want to trade. Maybe it's a direct bishop f4. Maybe it's a slow way to get that bishop traded. We'll go bishop d2 and bishop b4 maybe. Again, there are lots of possibilities, but at some point, bishop trade, gain more control on the e5 square, play on the c file, both sides at the c file axis. These things seem to be very positional and slow, right? So Austin is also in there. Now, I know some of you already mentioned this early on. Alexander mentioned this. Austin mentioned this now. And I think someone else mentioned early on, but I'm not so sure yet. No, Roger mentioned this. Very nice. Play after the king. Yeah. So you can try to play after the king. So this is a very important decision. And yes, you can. If you want to play after the king, you have to definitely try to open up the position before black can castle. And as you can see, black is castling very quickly. Yeah, black is about to castle in one move. But here comes the big challenge, is that in this case, it's not that easy to play e4 because I have too many pawns guarding it, right? So you have to be a little careful about it. But it's nevertheless a move you should consider, particularly with the rook set up on e1, right? When you look at this, you have to calculate it. So question is, should you calculate e4 first? Should you try to think about the positional thing first? What do you guys think? Which way should you go? if you're playing white here, would you calculate e4 move first? Or would you try to say, you know what, I'm going to calculate the positional aspect or try to plan the positional aspect first? Roger says positional first. Austin says calculate e4 first. I like it. G4 and e4. Interesting. Okay. All right. So I've gotten some answers already. Yes, I would definitely calculate e4 first because e4 is more forcing, right? But at the same time, I will very quickly evaluate both to say how deep will I go into it, right? So I want all of you to start calculating e4, and we want to first see if there is anything we can even, be interested in, because you have to tell me what is interesting in e4 to see that we can even pursue this more. We can calculate this more, right? Eric, that's interesting, but I want you to calculate some defense. Yeah, very interesting. I think I've already gotten 2 or 3 variations that might be interesting, but you have to keep calculating defense and you have to keep going further. So let's say it will take about 5 minutes. But again, I keep writing your calculation in variations though. I'm not going to consider any of this as final calculation until we get to that point. Okay, obviously after e4, I'm calculating f takes e4, yeah? D takes you can calculate d takes e4 too, because after queen e6, check queen e7, it's possible to calculate that a little bit, but I'm definitely calculating f takes e4. Hey, Austin, we just started this position. We have talked about what's going on in this position. We have not done much, we have not done any moves on the board, so you didn't miss in terms of moves. We just started looking at this position, and we decided there are 2 ways to go about it. There's a positional aspect to trade the dark squared bishops, play for the e5 square, or there's a dynamic aspect, play for the e8 king. And we decided first we have to calculate on how to expose the king. So which means pawn e4 is a move we are calculating right now. Oh, Austin, that's a fantastic point. That'll be really nice. If you can get the knight on d2 to d3, that's a very nice positional comment. That'll be fantastic. But it's not easy. It's a very long, slow process to get your knight to d3. What might be easier is to bring the other knight. Knight on f3 goes to e5 and you go to f3. Might be a little bit easier to achieve. But anyways, yeah, that's very much possible. But we are actually calculating the move e4 right now. Roger, that's a very, very interesting variation. I want to see how you evaluate it. Because clearly we have a much simpler option to go on right now, and instead you're giving me a different option, so you have to come up with a clear plan to say how will you evaluate it. Okay, just wanted to check that. Okay, all right. So Aradhya is saying, Aradhya, in your variation in the end, I have knight f7, don't I? And Austin, in your variation, I might have something like king f7. Can I play king? I think I have king f7 because I hit your rook and I get out of the pin, and I'm also defending the b8. When you play bishop f4, I think. Oh, no, I think you're giving me a different one. Hold on. Austin Tang is the one I'm talking about. Austin May has also given me a variation. All right, let's talk about it now, guys. Okay, so I guess most of you are at least landing on an interesting question, which is to take on e6 at some point. Yeah, the whole point of e4 should be for you to try to take this. All sorts of follow-ups would be some knight takes e4 sacrifice, knight g5. I don't know why the arrow goes like that. These are clearly the follow-ups that we're looking for, right? So let's go through the most direct question. Yeah, so e4, f takes e4. Now again, we have to look for some candidate moves, but I'm guessing all of you are looking at the very main or most important or precise move, which is knight takes e4. I wouldn't call it precise, but the most logical move. Yeah, knight takes e4, and I play pawn takes e4. So now the question is, can you justify this variation first, right? If this variation is not interesting already, I might take a step back and say I'm not very keen on this. Now, I think Roger and Austin Tang went a little further on this. I think Austin May, you wanted to play bishop takes h6 here, right? I'm trying to see, okay, that's a very interesting move. Is there anything I can do? That's actually interesting. So e4, f takes e4, knight takes e4, pawn takes e4, and without taking on e6, you play bishop takes h6. I guess I'll have to play pawn takes h6. And after queen takes e6, still play queen e7. Probably that's what I'll have to do. I'll give up that pawn on h6 if you want to play queen takes h6. Eric, when do you want to play knight g5, Eric? So e4, f takes e4, knight g5 is actually a very interesting idea, Eric. So knight takes e4 and knight g5 are both possible. Now, what do you expect black to play after knight g5? I think black has a very logical move. Okay. So e4, f takes e4, knight takes e4, d takes e4, then knight g5. Okay, fair enough. Still, what is black's most logical response? Bishop f7, yeah. So by the way, in most of this variation, there are two defending moves that are popping up. There is queen e7 when you play queen e6 check. There is bishop f7 when you play knight g5. These are the moves I would play, because bishop f7, what it does is when you play knight takes f7, knight takes f7, now if you play queen e6 or something, the knight on f7 will be guarding the d6 bishop. So that's something that I can make definitely use, right? So, and also if you directly try to play knight e4, d4, queen e6, then I have queen e7. So Austin Tang, I think this is the same variation Roger gave too. So I'm going to talk about this variation to all of you. I'm not going to make any moves. Now, the reason in a position like this, I'm not making moves because you have two clear paths that you can go with, and you have to make a choice. And if you're going to go for e4, you better back it up to say, I really like this position, and that's why I want to do this, right? Otherwise, you shouldn't go for this path at all. You should simply just play something like knight f1, play a very normal position, right? I do want you to justify e4 if you're playing e4. So, are they saying I wouldn't play e4? Okay, first let me tell you this variation. Again, e4, f takes e4, knight takes e4, d takes e4, queen e6 check. After queen e7, I think some of you have given me rook takes e4. Looks like a very clear follow-up to me. And now I'm pretty much forced to take on e6 because you're threatening something like queen d5 and I'm losing my queen. So queen takes e6 is pretty forced, and after rook takes e6, bishop e7 also is forced, otherwise I'm losing a piece. Now I have seen two moves, bishop f4 and bishop g5. So I will look at bishop g5 because some of you played bishop g5. Okay, you're threatening on the e7 bishop. So I have to play knight f6 and rook k e1. Now I think black can defend the bishop. How can black defend? Who can tell me a move? Knight g8, correct. Now what? Knight g8. You have to see knight g8. What happens after that? Are you still equally interested? You're down a piece for 2 pawns. You do have a lot of pressure on my king and the e file, but I'm up a piece. So if I get out of pin, Sarvagna, thank you. I think you found a very more precise way to finish this position off there. So Austin, when you play bishop f4, I have king f7. Now I'm going to talk about Sarvagna, your answer in just a second, because that's definitely the winning path. But let's discuss this. So bishop f4. Again, make sure you're following up the calculation here. So e4, f takes e4, knight takes e4, d takes e4, queen e6 check, queen e7, rook takes e4. We're looking at queen takes e6, rook takes e6, bishop e7, and now bishop f4. So now I can play king f7. This is what I was telling someone else. So when I play king f7, I'm hitting your bishop and I'm threatening rook b to hitting a rook on e6. I'm threatening rook b e8. So somehow I feel like I'm getting out of the problem because knight g5 and knight e5 are both defended by my pieces. If I'm right, I'm still okay. Yeah. Because if you play knight g5, bishop takes g5, knight e5 is simple take, and e6 is also hanging. So you have to play something like rook a e1 and I'll play rook b e8. And it seems to me like I'm okay. After knight g8 followed by bishop d6. But now I feel like after, you can. After knight g8, bishop f4. But now my other knight on f6. I don't know if I can put that to use somewhere. That's actually interesting, Austin. I have to probably calculate that a little bit more. But that's a much simpler win, guys. It's a much simpler win in that position. So Wagner found it. I'll give you a couple of minutes. The position I'm talking about is after queen e6 check, queen e7, rook takes e4, queen takes e6, rook takes e6, bishop e7. This is the position, and it's just an easy win. You don't need to complicate anything. Roger, you got it. That's right. Eric, that's the move we're talking about that's not as strong. Ryan, no. Henry, good, good. I like it. Zoe, yep, that's right. Simple. Alexander Wang, good. Austin May, yep. Austin, you're chatting to everyone. Can you do private chat? Thanks. Okay, so the move is bishop takes h6, of course, yeah? So you have a simple tempo. The reason is you want to attack that e7 bishop with rook a e1. So bishop takes h6 and rook a e1, and then it's game over. So black can design there. So clearly black cannot do that, yeah? So I have to find something better. So in that case, what can I do? After rook takes e4, do I have a different move? Actually, in this, no, Austin Tang, we were also looking at that position, but the problem is that was not as clear. Once you played bishop g5, knight f6, rook e1, and you allowed me to play knight to g8, you still probably have some pressure, but it's not very straightforward. It's easier to simply take on h6 and go rook e1, yeah? That is much stronger. So anyway, so point is you're already satisfied with the calculation here enough to say that this is very interesting. Now, I've seen two types of players. You probably can try to ask a question here saying, okay, what will I do if I am in this scenario, right? And it's the nature of the player to decide. I probably will play positionally and I'm more used to that style now. But again, e4 is definitely very, very interesting to me. It just is more calculation and more forcing and, you know, adding more pressure immediately kind of playing style. Okay, so Kramnik was playing white here. He played e4. Very strong. I mean, this is a very nice position. Very great example for initiative. And after e4 takes, he actually played knight g5. So this is a move I guess we didn't really talk about. I think, Eric, at some point you were mentioning this move order slightly, but maybe after knight e4. But he played knight g5 directly. Now, knight e4 also works, by the way. Knight takes e4, pawn takes e4. To show you the variation we talked about, this is what we were looking at. And but by the way, we haven't looked at bishop e7 here, I think. Yeah, we have to look at bishop e7. But if bishop e7 is played, you can take on e4 and you feel like there is plenty of pressure. So Aradhya, the theme is a little bit about initiative. So initiative and calculation is what I really want to focus on. Okay, so let's go with the game. Knight g5 was played. And after, so I mean, clearly queen g5 doesn't work. Okay, tell me, just let's finish this quite easily. Simple calculation. But yeah, I want you to be very precise. You know, there are multiple probable ways to get good position, but I want you to give me the most cleanest way. Okay, got it from Austin Tang. Zoe, your move is good, but there's something simpler. Austin May, you also have something simpler. Aradhya, I like what you have. Knight takes e4 is obvious. And yeah, Zoe, the bishop f4 is a move. Yeah, so basically when the queen moves, you simply take and go bishop f4. I mean, you can take on d5, you can play bishop g5, all these things, but not necessarily. Takes and bishop f4, and it's game over. So I cannot take on g5. So clearly I have to defend e6. Knight e6 is too strong. So bishop f7 is almost only move. I can't really do anything else. And now, again, white has sacrificed the pawn. You have to continue with the theme. So anyways, knight e4 was the position and pawn takes. So I think, Eric, this kind of brings to the position you were talking about anyways. And you had given me some variation, if I remember right. But let's see, how does white win here? I guess this is mostly a transposition, except one or two small changes. Yeah, Eric, you're right. that transposes. Is there anything else black might be able to do after 96? That's the main question. Yeah, I cannot play queen e7 because knight g7, bishop h6. And then I think I win the queen back, yeah? Because if bishop takes, unless I have king d8. I'm thinking after knight e6, queen e7, knight g7, if king goes to d8, I can just move my queen. If king goes to f8, then I do have bishop h6 because after bishop b3, I play knight f5 check and I can take on e7. I hope everyone's following that, yeah? So there is really no other move here. And this kind of transposed to the variation we saw. After knight e6, bishop e6. Again, lots of possible moves, but nothing works. But there is one last question that I want to ask to finish. Okay, queen d6 is a threat. Beliavsky was playing black. He played king d8. What do you do here? Last move to finish off. Yep, I think I'm getting bishop g5 seems like a trade, yeah? Takes, queen g5, queen takes d6. I'm not sure you're threatening anything major for me. So I'm not sure if I'm too worried. Austin Tang, you got it right. Alexander, good. I'll give 30 more seconds. Anyone else? Owen, that's right. Simple and very, very strong. Yeah. So that's right. Okay, Austin, you got it right. Perfect. So yeah, and Roger, you got it right. So basically the moves queen d5, and after queen d5, I think it's just game over. So actually Beliavsky just resigned here. So the good thing about playing with initiative is that if you find the right calculation all the way to the end, you can just go for it. Now, the problem though is if you didn't play this move, or if you didn't find the most precise calculation, and then you have to make some judgment. I mean, this position, I think it's a little bit easier to judge because every variation you play, white keeps pressure. Like bishop f4, which was suggested early on, or bishop g5, rook e1, and then bishop f4, which was suggested. So to me, in terms of decision making, as long as you see the play, you should just be able to go into this variation and say, I like this, I want to do this, right? And then you figure it out as you go. You might not calculate every single thing all the way in move one, but you can definitely figure it out as you go, right? Okay, now let's move on to the next game. All right, so, all right. This is the next game we're going to be looking at. We'll do the same thing. We'll do the same thing we did. We'll talk about the position. Tell me what you see in this position. And let's go from there. I don't want moves. I don't want ideas. I don't want plans. I just want basic observation. What is going on? Semi-open C file. Okay. White pawns on dark square. Black pieces are terrible. Okay. More space. Well, I don't see more space yet. It seems to me that white's pawns are on the 4th rank and black can also be on the 4th rank. White light squares are Swiss cheese. Okay. Bad knight on a7. H1 a diagonal. White dark bishop is locked. Okay. Evan, do you think only white's position looks open, or are you talking about both? In general, the position is open. White pieces are also terrible. Austin says all pieces are terrible. More vulnerable. Okay. All right. Black knight's protecting b5. Okay. Right. Lots of interesting things. So let's start with all the things that you guys have told me. Looks like a beginner game. Well, I wouldn't say that. Okay, we got the 2 kings in the center, yeah? And also, both kings are not immediately ready to castle. You probably need a couple of moves. So definitely, in that sense, both sides are not developed yet. someone pointed out every single pawn that white has seems to be in a dark square. And these two are really fixed pawns, but the rest of them are not fixed. So this could be a potential bad bishop in the future. Yeah. Right now, none of these pawns are fixed. So that's still okay. Someone mentioned about space. I think space is kind of even right now. These are the only two pawns that are locked. Black definitely can challenge the center, can probably challenge here too if I want to. But if white probably achieves h5, then I can say white can have more space at the king side. That's only if white wants to, right? Yeah, Alexander wants to open up the bishops. That's very much a possible idea. That should be the first thing you should definitely consider. You can play d5 to open up the bishop, but you're also giving up the center and a pawn. So you'll activate your piece, but you're giving up the center and you're giving up a pawn. The knight on a7 is a bad piece, I have to agree, because this knight is guarding the b5 pawn and doesn't seem to have a lot of future. I would clearly like this knight to be in a good outpost square. By the way, no one mentioned about outpost or weak squares yet, or weak pawns in this observation. Why not? You should have. What are the outpost squares? What are the weak pawns? Yep, that knight would definitely come to c4. I would like that, yeah? If I play d5 and then bring the knight into c8, b6, and the c7 is a weak pawn. I wouldn't say c7 is a weak pawn, Austin, because I think I can always do this. Unless d5, if d5 is played, then yes, c7 will become a backward pawn and weak. a3 is definitely a weak pawn. It's in a semi-open file. It's a backward pawn. a4 is technically an outpost too, right? So, but I don't think I cannot visualize myself putting a piece on a4 though. It's a good square, but it's probably not going to help me to put a piece on a4. Okay, so, all right, you got all the information you need to make decision. Positionally, what's going to happen, and dynamically, what can happen, because both kings are in the center, so you can definitely think dynamic. Both white and black. It's not just white has to think here. We're thinking from white's perspective. Both sides can think to say, I want to do something, I want to break something, I want to attack something. Or both sides can say, I'm going to go slow positional stuff. We have weak squares, weak pawns to deal with. So both are possible, yeah? Okay, so what do you think? Well, what can white do? Well, let's come up with some ideas. And then, of course, we'll have to decide which one makes the most sense. Okay, so far, Austin.
Doing something. Stop it. Stop it.
Okay, we probably want to stay on mute. Okay, so far I've gotten bishop g2. Castle is a positional approach. Bishop g2, d5, trying to go for the aggressive approach. By the way, Austin Tang, I think when you play bishop g2, black might play d5 too. e4 to regain the center. Okay, Roger, that's definitely an interesting idea. d5, bishop g2 and castle. So just want to sacrifice a pawn, Henry. Bishop g2 and castle just looks good. e4 and d5. Okay, interesting. So the first clear distinction is if you don't play, if you want to play for initiative, what move should you look at? I think most of you are clear with that. What move will you look at right now if you want to play for initiative? Very good, right? Clearly, you have to think about d5 first. If you play bishop g2, black might play d5. By the way, that has very interesting positional discussion too, because the minute I play c5, we talked about the fact that the c7 pawn becomes a backward pawn, becomes really, really weak. The c5 square is an outpost. White knight can jump in and get to c5. So it looks like a normal position, but I would say that there's some positives and negatives. White bishop on b2 is terrible at that point. So you can, again, there's some give and take in this position. You can look at both. But if you do play d5, I really need some justification. I mean, just bishop g2 and castle is not justification. You have to tell me why you like that move. I mean, I take on d5, I play pawn to c6. My pawn's totally set. If you notice any problems, then type it in chat. Otherwise, I'm not buying into it yet. You have to convince me. So Ragna, I like the reasoning, very good. But then I think black has a defense against it, Ragna. You have to think about how you will deal with that defense. Anyone else? Why should you give up that pawn and play for initiative? Maybe you don't want to, but if you do want to play d5, where is the justification? Henry, fair enough. I asked the same thing to Sir Wagner. I think the point you're making is really good, but why can't black defend against that plan? Heaven says intuition. Good intuition, but you have to tell me, still justify it with some reasoning. Yeah. Remember this, I play some move because I find it interesting, right? Particularly if it's an initiative, it's a sacrifice. It can be like, oh, I have zero calculation involved. It's usually always 2 or 3 moves calculation involved after that. And there's an evaluation after that to say, oh, this position looks nice for me or looks interesting to me, right? You can't sacrifice otherwise. Evan says, sorry, Austin May says there's a hook on d5 that you can try to play e4 later. I think I can stop that e4 idea too as black. So Wagner, that's right. I could always play f6. Then what is your interest in that position? So basically, d5 pawn takes d5. You play something like bishop g2. I'm going to play c6. The idea that most of you have told me is that the bishop on b2 is keeping an eye on g7. So black is going to find it difficult to move the f8 bishop. Totally agreed. That's the first thing that we are looking at, and that makes me feel like fantastic. But I want to know, why can't I simply play something like f6? And then I want to move the bishop out and castle. While in my initial calculation, I'll definitely look at this. If after bishop g to c6, you want to prepare e4. I mean, you can't play e4 yet until you castle, right? So Wagner wants to go h5 first. So you play d5, I take. Bishop g to c6. I'm guessing now you want to play h5 first, yeah? Okay, but h5, somehow not super convinced, because if you castle after playing h5, I think I might get some queen g5 kind of a move, and your h5 pawn will always be hanging, yeah? Not a big fan. So, Roger, your plan is a little slow, though. See, that's not what you want to do in terms of initiative. I think there are long-term compensation kind of play, too. There's nothing wrong with what you're trying. But in here, I would want something immediately happening. I would play d5 if I think I can do something as an immediate follow-up. Like, if I put my knight on d4, I'm blocking my bishop, so which means black's bishop can get out, right? So let's say I play f6, knight d4, bishop comes out. I don't know. I mean, it looks like you have some pressure in the longer run, but I'm still up a pawn. So frankly, if you ask me, yes, white has compensation. No questions about it. But I want something a little bit more concrete. Try to bring the knight on e4. So very simple, guys. Just one question. You have to just answer only one question right now to make a decision. Because I think everything else is straight. Your pieces are better. You have long-term pressure. All of that is agreed. d5, pawn takes d5, bishop g2, c6. That's all fine. At some point, black wants to play f6 and castle. f6 and move the bishop and castle. If you have something very concrete against this, then I'm very interested right now, and I'm going to play this. I'm going to figure out the rest. I think there is something very simple and concrete against this. Henry, yep. As simple as queen g4. After f6, I cannot even play bishop d6 because you'll play queen g4, and after I have to play king f7. And then you definitely can play h5, and the light squares are weak. So simple, queen g4, yeah? Strong enough to say that I want to play this variation, yeah? Okay. d5 was played in the game. He takes d5, bishop g2 was played, c6 was played, and castle. Just like we talked about, all of this happened. Now, I mean, f6 is, like I said, not really going to help black so much. You can play f6, but it's not going to help so much. You also played in the game, so we'll see that. But what if I play f5? How would you play against this? Eric, excellent. That was very quick and very precise. In bishop h3, is it actually threatening anything? h5, I have bishop h7, worst case. So if bishop h3, let's say I play queen e7. Queen f3, also I want to play queen e7. Because if you play h5, I could go bishop h7. I typically want to go to f7, but I can go to h7 too. g4, still queen e7. You take, I take with a bishop. If you play queen h5 check, I do get to play g6 with the tempo. So, sorry, g4, queen takes h4, my bad. e4, very aggressive. Okay, I'll take it. I played f5 to stop e4. I guess you did not deter you. I will take d takes e4 because I want to bring the next pawn d5 and kind of really defend e4. How would you do anything after that, Henry? Roger, perfect. I think so for Roger and Eric, both have it pretty nice because after the moves that you're playing, it's going to immediately collapse. But there's actually one more final move that I'll need to get from you, which I'll get to in a couple of minutes. But your plan is great. So Wagner, I'm not so sure e4 is that strong even anymore. And also f3 seems a little too discoordinated. I don't feel like my pieces are in the right place. Also, Roger, that was not the main move that White should be worried about. You can simply even move your queen. And I don't think there is any real problem. So Wagner, that's not so threatening, yeah? Okay, so I think we've had some time to think about this. The main point is f5 has opened up the e5 square for the knight. So knight f3 and knight e5 is very strong here. And this bishop is, of course, the key to all the light square defense. So if you go knight f3 here, I think black is in difficult situation because after knight e5, I can simply attack this pawn and it's almost impossible to defend that pawn because remember, g6 will always run into discovered attacks, right? So if you allow knight e5, bishop f7 or something, simply queen d3 might even pick up that pawn. Queen d3, bishop, queen c2, bishop h3 or something, and you might just pick up the pawn. On top of it, the knight on e5 is awesome. You cannot really play d6 because that will really weaken c6. Might even allow some shots at some point to take on c6 and take on d5. But d6 directly, I think is being asked. And the problem with d6 is, again, if I go here, now I really don't think how you'll, it's very difficult for you to defend these pawns now. It's one thing to go knight d4 with the pawn on d7. I only have to defend f5. It's another thing like this. Now I think it's much easier for white and black's position will definitely collapse. But okay, let's ask one last question here before we move on to what happened in the game. So let's say I play something like queen e7, knight e5. Now, okay, bishop f7, like I said, you will attack f5 and it will be trouble. Maybe I play something like this. Okay, I see you guys are discussing, Austin. We can discuss your plan. I mean, your game after it looks like you had a very tough, tough loss of 3 pawns. I guess we'll give me an answer here and then talk about that game. Okay, what should white play here? Lots of good moves. One crushing move. One second. I see a lot of you are giving me bishop f3. It's not a bad idea, but I think I can defend against it. I'll give you one more minute. Sorry. Okay, so I'm getting mostly bishop h3 and bishop f3. Again, all interesting moves, but I think I have one person with the best move. a4 is actually beautiful here. I know when we think of attack, we don't think about this, but this is just completely going to take black's position apart because at the very beginning, we talked about how the a7 knight is a problem. And after a4, the a7 knight is going to be really exploited. Yeah. Okay. I think we don't need to calculate too much because pawn takes, rook takes, and there's queen a1. And if not, I'm going to take on b5, and it's again completely losing for black. I know, but there's no way I would be thinking about a4 in this position. I know most of you are probably thinking about the king side or the center. Yeah. Okay, let's go through the game though. f6 was played in the game, and I guess the next couple of moves very normal. Kasparov was playing white here, so he played rook e1, and after bishop e7, he played queen g4. Again, very natural attacking moves. After king f7, h5, and bishop h7. So I think everything is very natural. What do you think he played here? Again, very natural move. Yep, I think everyone's finding this very straightforward. He played e4, pawn takes e4, bishop takes e4. Again, getting rid of the light square bishop makes a lot more sense in this position. Bishop takes, knight takes e4, and eventually knight c8 was played. I think at this point, we don't really need to decide who's better, but it's just fun to finish off the game here. So he played rook a d1 again, bringing the last piece into the game. Rook a7. Now I need a finish. Let's calculate the finish. How I need a precise variation. There are a couple of variations. Basically, there are two main variations, and both of them are pretty straightforward, but you get only one shot, so no taking back. Finish off the game for white. Okay, so bishop d4 seems a little too slow. Again, knight c5 seems to be on the other side. You should be looking at something more forcing on this side, guys. What is the first move you should be calculating here? Yep, queen g6 check is what I want you to calculate. What happens after queen g6 check? Okay, king f8 is forced. Keep going after that. There is only one real forcing move that comes after that. Yep, I think knight takes f6. You have to calculate knight takes f6. So what happens after that? After basically, I want you to tell me what is the answer after bishop takes f6. That's the main variation. Everything else is pretty straightforward. Yep, Austin has given me the final answer. So basically, you go after rook e8 check, probably doesn't work, yeah? So in the game, you started with knight f6 first. You can play queen g6 also. Shouldn't really make a difference, but bishop f6, queen g6, king f8. The key is to take, and find this last move, which is very basically a crushing move. Rook e6, and game over, because there's no way to stop rook f6. All right, that is a good place for us to wrap this up today. 2 games. Hopefully you had fun. Initiative, one from Kramnik, one from Kasparov. And yeah, again, you have to make sure you calculate precisely. There's no way to make these decisions without making simple calculation. Okay. All right. Thank you, everyone.